ability to speak and to console her. As the time of delivery began to draw near, the pains of labor started. Hoping that now they would change their minds, Khadija sent a message to the women of Quraysh, her previous friends, seeking their assistance in delivering her child. However, when approached, the women retorted, saying that because she had ignored their suggestions not to marry Muhammad, they would not assist her. Not only was the Prophet sidelined, but in such difficult times, his wife was also given the cold shoulder. Khadija became restless after hearing their reply. However, just as she had never forsaken Allah, Allah too did not forget her. At this instant, she saw 4 women enter her room. Khadija was confused. One of them said to her, "O Khadija, do not be distressed. We have come to your aid by the command of Allah. We are your sisters. I am Sarah, the wife of Prophet Ibrahim. This is Asiya, the daughter of Mazahim, the believing wife of the Pharaoh, who shall be your companion in paradise. This is Maryam, the daughter of Imran, the mother of Prophet Isa. And the 4th is Kulthum, the sister of Prophet Musa. Allah has sent us to assist you at the time of your delivery." One of them sat at the right side of Lady Khadija, the other on her left, the 3rd facing her, and the 4th behind her to support her during her delivery. As Fatima az-Zahra came into this world, Allah ordered 10 damsels of paradise to descend, carrying trays and pitchers filled with water from the fountains of Kawthar. The woman standing in front of Lady Khadija lifted the newborn infant Fatima and washed her with the heavenly water. Then 2 white pieces of cloth, described as being whiter than milk and emitting a fragrance better than musk and amber, were brought, and she was wrapped in one of them, while the second was used as a scarf around her head. They then asked Fatima to speak, and she did so by bearing witness to the oneness of Allah and the prophethood of her father Muhammad. The women then turned towards Lady Khadija and said, "O Khadija, take hold of your child, a chaste, virtuous, prosperous, and auspicious infant, one from whom a blessed progeny will emerge." The birth of Fatima az-Zahra heralds in yet another significant spiritual milestone in the life of this great personality. With such a noble birth, is it any wonder that she is so revered in Islam and that millions look to her as a guide and inspiration? With that, we will now call upon an extremely talented young sister, Sister Alwiya Zainab Al-Qazwini, who is just 10 years old. Zainab enjoys memorizing the Holy Quran, and she began memorizing when she was in kindergarten. And now, mashallah, she has memorized 5.5 ajza. Please help me in welcoming little Zainab to the podium with a salawat.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم عنهم والله غفور رحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا إن جاءكم فاسق بنبأ فتبينوا أن تصيبوا قوما بجهالة فتصبحوا على ما فعلتم نادمين واعلموا أن فيكم رسول الله لو يطيعكم في كثير من الأمر لعنتم ولكن الله حبب إليكم الإيمان وزينه في قلوبكم وكره إليكم الكفر والفسوق والعصيان أولئك هم الراشدون فضلا من الله ونعمة والله عليم حكيم وإن طائفتان من المؤمنين اقتتلوا فأصلحوا بينهما فإن بغت إحداهما على الأخرى فقاتلوا التي تبغي حتى تفيء إلى أمر الله فإن فاءت فأصلحوا بينهما بالعدل وأقسطوا إن الله يحب المقسطين إنما المؤمنون إخوة فأصلحوا بين أخويكم واتقوا الله لعلكم ترحمون يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا يسخر قوم من قوم عسى أن يكونوا خيرا منهم ولا نساء من نساء عسى أن يكن خيرا منهن ولا تلمزوا أنفسكم ولا تنابزوا بالألقاب بئس الاسم الفسوق بعد الإيمان ومن لم يتب فأولئك هم الظالمون يا أيها الذين آمنوا اجتنبوا كثيرا من الظن إن بعض الظن إثم ولا تجسسوا ولا يغتب بعضكم بعضا أيحب أحدكم أن يأكل لحم أخيه ميتا فكرهتموه واتقوا الله إن الله تواب رحيم يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير قالت الأعراب آمنا قل لم تؤمنوا ولكن قولوا أسلمنا ولما يدخل الإيمان في قلوبكم وإن تطيعوا الله ورسوله لا يلدكم من أعمالكم شيئا إن الله غفور رحيم إنما المؤمنون الذين آمنوا بالله ورسوله ثم لم يرتابوا وجاهدوا بأموالهم وأنفسهم في سبيل الله أولئك هم الصادقون قل أتعلمون الله بدينكم والله يعلم ما في السماوات وما في الأرض والله بكل شيء عليم يمنون عليك أن أسلموا قل لا تمنوا علي إسلامكم بل الله يمن عليكم أن هداكم للإيمان إن كنتم صادقين إن الله يعلم غيب السماوات والأرض والله بصير بما تعملون صدق الله العلي العظيم.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah. I'm really lost for words. That was MashaAllah. Can somebody tell me which surah that was that she recited other than her family? With Hujurat. Thank you. That was the entire Surah Al-Hujurat, Chambers. MashaAllah. May Allah bless you, your mother and your father and your entire family for such beautiful recitation. Can we have another loud salawat for her, please? I would now like to welcome another young community member who is also very talented, is in 7th grade at Guide Academy, described as a patient and polite young girl who is respectful of others, a very dear and lovable child to her father, and an older sibling of 2. Sister Noura Sub-Zero will translate the verses that Zainab just recited so well for us. Please welcome Sister Noura with a loud salawat.
Assalamu alaikum. In the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most compassionate. O you who have believed, do not put yourselves before Allah and His Messenger, but fear Allah. Indeed, Allah is hearing and knowing. O you who have believed, do not raise your voices above the voices of the Prophet, or be loud to him in speech like the loudness of some of you to others, lest your deeds become worthless while you perceive not. Indeed, those who lower their voices before the Messenger of Allah, they are the ones whose heart Allah has tested for righteousness. For them is forgiveness and great reward. Indeed, those who call you, O Muhammad, from behind the chambers, most of them do not use reason. And if they have been patient until you could come out to them, it would have been better for them. But Allah is forgiving and merciful. O you who have believed, if there comes to you a disobedient one with information, investigate, lest you harm a person out of ignorance and become, over what you have done, regretful. And know that among you is the Messenger of Allah. If he were to obey you in much of the matter, you wouldn't be in difficulty. But Allah has endured you to the faith and has made it pleasing in your hearts and made the hateful to the disobedient. Those are the rightly guided. It is in bounty from Allah in favor, and Allah is knowing and wise. And if 2 factions among the believers should fight, then make settlement between the 2. But if one of them oppresses the other, then fight against the one that oppresses until it returns to the ordinance of Allah. And if it returns, then make settlement between them in justice and act justly. Indeed, Allah loves those who act justly. The believers are nothing but brothers, so make them settle between their brothers. And Allah, that you may receive mercy. O you who have believed, do not let a person ridicule another person. Maybe they are better than them. Nor let women ridicule other women. Maybe they are better than them. And do not insult one, and do not call each other by offensive nicknames. Wrecked is the name of disobedience after one's faith, and whoever does not repent, then it is one of those who are the wrongdoers. O you who have believed, avoid much negative assumption. Indeed, some assumption is sin, and do not spy or backbite on each other. What would you like it if you ate the flesh of your brother when he's dead? You would detest it, and fear Allah. Indeed, Allah is accepting of repentance and merciful. O mankind, indeed we have created you from the male and female, and you are people and tribes that you may know one another. Indeed, the most noble one of you is in the sight of Allah, the most righteous from you. Indeed, Allah is knowing and acquainted. The Bedouins say, we have believed. Say, you have not yet believed, but say instead, we have submitted. For fate has not yet entered our hearts. And if you obey Allah and His Messenger, He will not deprive you from your deeds of anything. Indeed, Allah is forgiving and merciful. The believers are the only ones who have believed in Allah and His Messenger, and then doubt but not strive with their properties and their lives in the cause of Allah. It is those who are the truthful. Say, would you acquaint Allah with your religion while Allah knows whatever is in the heavens and on the earth, and Allah is knowing of all things? They consider the favor that they have accepted Islam. Say, do not consider your Islam a favor to me. Rather, Allah has conferred a favor upon that guided you to the faith, if it should be truthful. Indeed, Allah knows the unseen aspects of the heavens and the earth, and Allah is seeing of what you do. Salawat.
Thank you, Sister Noura. That was beautiful. May Allah bless you. Before I continue, I've been asked to remind you that we do have 2 teachers upstairs. So if you have young children and they want to spend some time upstairs and play, please do go upstairs. We have 2 teachers who can look after them. I'm very excited to now introduce a lovely panel of 4. Outstanding and dedicated girls from the IECOC Sunday School, of whom without the program today would not be the same. They will be reciting a nasheed highlighting the beautiful characteristics of Lady Fatima Zahra. These girls have truly worked very hard by their teacher, Sister Zaina Bazi, and she does everything it takes to get the girls prepared. Let us welcome the girls in order as they come with a salawat. Maryam Malala, Leah Taha, Dima Marandi, Roya Marandi. Recite a loud salawat for them. Thank you, girls. Thank you, girls. That was fantastic. We now have a beautiful young girl, only 15 years of age, who is always eager to participate within the community. And described by her teacher, who has known her for 5 years, as a very polite, bright, hardworking, and performs beyond expectations. She loves to study Arabic and Islamic studies. Please help me in welcoming Sister Zara Ghazi, who will tell us an intriguing story on our beloved role model, Sayyidah Fatima Zahra.
Assalamu alaikum. Fatima Zahra alayhi salam lived in a 2-room house made out of clay, wore the simplest garments from head to toe, grinding wheat and barley with her bare hands to prepare a meal for her family, and attended to her 4 children with utmost love and mercy. Yet she was no ordinary woman. Fatima Zahra alayhi salam had high moral virtues, and her life was full of spiritual behavior. Even on her marriage day, Fatima Zahra alayhi salam did not forget about those in need. A girl's wedding dress is probably one of her most cherished belongings. However, in the case of the noble lady Fatima alayhi salam, it is not. Prophet of Islam Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam bought Fatima Zahra alayhi salam a new dress for her marriage ceremony. Fatima Zahra alayhi salam owned a patchy dress before. A poor woman came to her house and asked for a used cloth. Fatima Zahra alayhi salam desired to give her the old patchy dress, as the woman had asked, but remembered the verse, "By no means shall you attain to righteousness until you spend benevolently out of what you love," from Surah Imran, ayah 92. So she gave her the new wedding dress while she wore her old dress to her wedding. When Prophet of Islam Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam why she did not donate her old dress, Fatima Zahra alayhi salam replied, "Because she followed the teachings of the noble Quran. The lesson of selfless love and helping those in need remains clear in every story." All of this shows the simplicity of Fatima Zahra and her moral virtues. Because of Fatima Zahra's character and moral virtues, Allah has put so much trust in her and love for her that He is pleased whenever she is pleased. Thank you.
Thank you, Zahra. That was truly magnificent. We're moving on to our keynote speakers tonight. Our first one tonight is one many of you have heard speak before. She used to be the former IECOC youth group president, after which she went to law school, and now is an attorney defending employers in employment lawsuits. She has a passion and trains in martial arts, Muay Thai, did I say that right? And Jiu-Jitsu. We're very excited to hear from our dear sister, Ahlam Berry.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Thank you all for coming tonight, and I would like to congratulate you on this auspicious occasion. It's very strange being back up here. It feels like a lifetime ago, but I'm so honored and happy to see all of you here tonight. At first I was concerned because I came 15 minutes early and it was completely empty. And then exactly at like 7:05 it filled up. So I'm happy to see you all came. I was asked to speak, and at first I hesitated because I did not know what I wanted to talk about. So I decided to go back in former speeches with the hopes of finding something that I had spoken about that I could either use a part of or would inspire me. However, I did not find much that was helpful, but going back in the speeches that I had previously written and saved, I saw my progression over time, and it was very nostalgic to see what young me was passionate about and the things that had captured my attention. And it really made me think about my journey over the past 10 years as a woman and as a Muslim woman in America. And it made me think of all the realizations I had come to growing up and all of the things that had inspired me and motivated me to becoming the person that I am today. So tonight I decided that I want to express the things that I wish I had known when I was younger and the things somebody had told me in my more formative years that would have inspired me to make different decisions in my life. Typically, and I imagine I've spoken about this before, we tend to talk about the women's rights in Islam, and it's a topic that's discussed time and time again, and today I wanted to take a different approach to it. So tonight I'm going to talk about the enforcement of those rights. Islam bestows upon women many rights, broad rights that were unprecedented at the time and really did not come into existence in the West until very recently. However, those rights are useless when women are not empowered to take those rights and are actively discouraged from taking those rights. Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam is known and praised for her closeness to God, her piety, her modesty, her role as a daughter, her role as a mother, her role as a wife. She went through difficult times with her father, and she went through difficult times with her husband during the inception of Islam. And she handled these difficulties with grace and resoluteness in her belief in God and the message of her father, peace be upon him. Hearing about these stories while growing up, while beautiful, always left me unsatisfied and kind of frustrated, but I wasn't sure why. I remember the first time I heard the story about Fadak, which I'm sure many of you already know, so I'm not going to get into it. But essentially, when the Prophet, peace be upon him, died, Sayyidah Fatima was entitled to a piece of land as a part of her inheritance. And the companions of the Prophets essentially prevented her from taking that inheritance. And so she stood up and against her oppressors and spoke out for her rights. Now, she wasn't exactly successful, but she did something that was difficult to do at the time, and so there was a lot to learn from. Hearing that story sparked something inside of me. I realized that when that story was told, that was really the first time I heard something about Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam, where she was not juxtaposed next to a man, where it was not her role as a daughter, her role as a wife, or her role as a mother. It was who Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam was as a woman, as a person. And that she was incredible in her own right. And that highlight was inspiring for me. Later, I came to learn, as I grew, about Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam. I don't think that there's a story that was more inspiring to me when I was younger, and still to this day, than the story of Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam in the court of Yazid in Sham after the tragedy of Karbala. The way she stood up to the greatest oppressor, unafraid of the consequences, while knowing the tragedy and the trauma that she had just experienced. She stood up to him and, in essence, ensured that the story of Karbala would continue on. And it's because of her strength, her intellect, perseverance, and resoluteness on that day that we still remember Karbala. So this brings me to my main point. And before I continue on, I want to preface what I'm about to say with the following. While I am critical of a lot of practices within the Muslim community that stem from our cultural standards and not those of Islam, what I'm about to say is not meant as an attack or meant to cause anyone to be defensive. And really, my target in the audience is the woman. I'm speaking to my past self with the hope that somebody would learn something they didn't know and empower them to move forward. The reason is that the only way that I was able to enforce my rights in my life, whether it's in Islam or just out here in the West, is because I knew my rights and that I was able to eventually identify what prevented me from gaining these rights. And I learned how to articulate why there were obstacles. The Muslim community, when in the face of attacks by the West, used the rights in Islam that are bestowed upon women to justify how forward-thinking Islam is. However, unfortunately, from time to time, these same people will turn around and discourage their women from taking advantage of these rights. The most obvious example of this, and this one is particular to me, particularly important to me because I recently got married. And this was something that I had difficulty understanding while going through the process. In Islam, a woman has the right to include a provision in their marriage contract in which they ensure their right to divorce. However, more often than not, women are discouraged from putting that in their contract. I was told in the process that no self-respecting man would marry a woman who wanted to include that in their contract, because women were so emotional that they could not be trusted to not just decide to divorce for no reason. Which I thought was ironic and frustrating given the varying degrees of domestic abuse, physical, emotional, mental, and financial that women are often subjected to. Another example is a woman's obligation to her husband and vice versa. I've often engaged in many conversations in my younger years while trying to figure out what I had valued. And the first thing that popped up in this conversation was automatically that God tells a woman to obey her husband. And that is typically where the conversation ended. No one would go on to continue that in turn for obeying her husband, a woman was also entitled to only obligated and to engage in intimate relations and really had nothing else that she had to do in the eyes of God. That she did not have to keep the home and she could go work if she wanted. And that if a woman doesn't work, or if a woman doesn't work around the house, if a woman decides to work around the house, she is able to request a form of payment. However, in these conversations, whenever this is brought up, people are would often characterize these women as a woman without ethics, a woman without class, and a woman without integrity. And in my opinion, a marriage is supposed to be one that is based on love and respect and concern for one another, which would ultimately cause the parties to act fairly to each other and to do things that would help one another. However, while I agree with that, this is not the standard that is always kept. And another example is the newer generation of women, my generation, a new method of prevention of enjoying their rights is that many men have now taken the position that yes, you are equal. However, I believe you have to, I as the man, believe you have to contribute to the marriage in a way that I deem equal. In Islam, the man has the financial burden, the sole financial burden. And so when a woman decides to work, now men are expecting that the woman contribute financially on top of the housekeeping and the childbearing and child rearing. And now I understand that some people might have a problem with the broad and generous privileges that God gave women, but that is not a problem to take up with women, that is a problem to take up with God. And again, I will repeat that a healthy relationship based on love and respect will take form in equal contribution. And that is the type of relationship that I'm a proponent of. However, given that women are commonly abused in some form, it's important that a woman be allowed to take advantage of her rights. Now going back to Sayyidah Fatima and Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam, there's a reason, in my opinion, why they were able to take advantage of their rights. There's a reason why they stood up against the oppressors in the way that they did. It was not simply because they knew they had rights. It was because the men in their lives supported them They did not have to face their men and then face oppressors. Ultimately, many women today do so. And the worst part of this, unfortunately, is many women have been taught that the only way to be valued or be loved is to accept this ideology and perpetuate it against other women. And there's a number of women who have raised their sons to perpetuate the same problems because that's their little prince, while their daughters are being subjected to another woman's prince. And ironically, typically these moms have been subjected to some form of abuse as well. Essentially, my goal in saying these things is that in Islam, women have a high value. Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam and Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam are always used as examples for modesty, for piety, for being kind and good. But unfortunately today, many people don't allow them to be used as an example to inspire our young women in our time. And I think that does them a great disservice, and I don't want these days to go without some lessons so that the women are treated better and Islam can move forward in a more positive way. Growing up, I had difficulty expressing and articulating my thoughts when challenged. And there was an unexplained frustration and lack of understanding with why I understood what the challenge was, but I still didn't agree with it. And eventually, growing up, I learned of the method of gaslighting. And I think this is a very important method to quiet the conversations that need to be had, specifically by women. Gaslighting is a common method that a person or an entity uses to protect their status or to maintain their power. And it's a tactic in which a person or a group of people make the victim question their reality. And this is a method that is done slowly and over time and is often difficult to detect. And also, amazingly, it's so ingrained in our cultures that often people don't realize that they're doing it. An example of gaslighting is when a gaslighter's actions do not match their words. So going back to my point with divorce, I remember having conversations where men and brothers would be extremely concerned about their daughters and their sisters. And when asked why, they would state, "I know how a man thinks, I don't trust them." However, when a woman comes time to marry a man, suddenly it's unreasonable for her to try to protect herself. And when asked to reconcile that inconsistency, there is no answer. Another method of gaslighting is throwing positive reinforcement to confuse you. I remember a time in my life where people would tell me, "Wow, you're not like other girls," and I would take that as a compliment. And it was a compliment that made me look down on other women and refrain from engaging in otherwise acceptable behavior just because it was seen as different. Because I was scared of losing that value. And at the same time, it would cause me to put down other women for engaging in this acceptable behavior. And then another method, one that is extremely effective and one that I still battle to this day, is being told that you're too crazy or you're too sensitive when talking about topics that bother you. Now, I'm sure many people are confused by this topic and why I chose it. The reason is I'm friends with the most incredible women I have ever met in my life. Women that have accomplished so much and have the potential and the drive to accomplish so much more. They are the best people and they do the absolute most to be the best versions of themselves. Yet they are consistently disrespected by their significant others, their fathers, their brothers, or the men in the community. And when they stand up for themselves, they are insulted and they are shunned. And I also have a number of friends who are in vulnerable positions that cannot defend themselves. And that fills me with sadness and anger. If the community as a whole discourages women from invoking their rights and protections that God has provided them, we will not progress as a community. As you can tell, our generation of women is different than one we've experienced before. We are all educated, we are all getting towards professional careers, and the community as a whole needs to step up and move forward. Otherwise, there is a humongous risk that my generation will lose touch with their religion because they do not fit in their communities. And I have felt that, even though I grew up in this community. And I know a lot of people who feel that and are not here today because they do not feel like they have a home. And ignoring the problem will not make it go away, and it will not help our complaints that, oh, the younger generation is not here. Growing up, I did not have many female role models. And that affected me a lot. It messed with my mind and it made me adopt beliefs or behaviors that were detrimental to me that I later realized was not in my best interest. And I had to learn a lot through trial and error and in a lot of circumstances that were new to me, whether it's in the masjid, relationships, or in the workplace. And it's my most fervent hope that women are aware that they're not alone. And if there's a single woman that benefits from what I say, I am happy. If we want our women in this community and in the Muslim community as a whole to be great like Fatima and Zainab, alayhim as-salam, we have to treat them as if they were Fatima and Zainab and allow them to feel comfortable to enforce their rights and to be protected so that they can grow. Women have the potential and have shown to be the most incredible of God's creations, but only if they're not held back by their own community. I thank you all so much for coming tonight, and I sincerely hope I didn't offend anyone. But typically, if I'm asked to speak, I will speak on topics that I'm most passionate about. Sometimes difficult conversations need to be had with the community, but if everyone approaches it with love and respect, we can all improve together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sister Ahlam. I'm sure we all benefited from your talk today. Our next guest speaker is one who I know that many of us look up to and are mesmerized by her sheer love and attraction towards the Ahlul Bayt. She is a natural and has given many inspiring talks to the community and youth at large. I'm sure you've guessed who this might be. Let me give you some more clues. She is a graduate from USC who has traveled around the world studying different spiritual paths as a means of enriching her own faith. She believes that Islam's innate beauty is not diminished but magnified through studying science, psychology, and philosophy. She believes that when we look at our life and the world around us through Allah's love, everything falls into place. Her deep prayer for you and every audience she speaks to is to understand you in a way that no human ever can. A humble woman that she is, she does not consider herself an expert or a scholar, just an average Muslim woman who seeks to share her love of Islam with seekers of all paths. Any clue who this might be? Help me in welcoming Sister Arzu Yasai to the podium with a loud salawat.
السلام عليكم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. I just wanted to start with gratitude for all the women who've put so much effort into this program and for everything they did to make it this beautiful day that we could celebrate Hazrat Fatima. So I just wanted to maybe say a loud salavat for all the women who put this event together. Allah. I wanted to talk about the power of knowing your why and how Fatima Zahra teaches us that and how that relates to answering the question of why do bad things sometimes happen to good people. When we turn to the Quran, we see that the Quran explains the reasons in which we were created by saying that Allah created us to worship Him. And in another instant, that Allah created us as representatives of Him. And that the Prophet, peace be upon him, was created as a mercy to all worlds. And so the Quran lays out our why. Why we were created was to worship Allah. And we could only worship God if we love God. And we could only love God if we know God. And so we were created to know God. And we could only be representatives of God if we know ourselves. So we were created to know ourselves. And in knowing God and knowing ourselves, we were then created to be reflections of God's love upon all worlds. I start with our why because it sets the scene for some insights in Fatima Zahra's life. Last year, we talked about the story of her giving away her wedding dress. We hear this story every year, but this year, I felt like there was an insight I missed because I was not looking at the story through the why we have been created. So when we look at the story of, for those who don't know, one day Fatima Zahra was getting married and somebody knocked on her door. It was a beggar, and she asked for a dress. And Fatima Zahra had a wedding dress and she had an old dress, but she chose to give the beggar the wedding dress because she remembered the verse of the Quran that says, none of you will attain righteousness or piety or taqwa unless you give freely of what you love. Hazrat Fatima knew how to act because she knew her why. She knew she was created to praise Allah. She knew she was created to know herself and to foster the qualities of virtue within herself. Thank you. And she knew that she was created to be a reflection of God's love on earth. And so she gave the wedding dress. But one thing we often don't talk about, and I researched so hard on the internet to find if anyone spoke about this, is that she never asked or considered whether she would give or not. It was just what she would give. She never thought whether she would give a dress at all. It was what she would give. And so the first lesson of living our why through her story is that anytime anyone asks you for anything, the answer is always, yes, I will give. The what will change. So if somebody asks me for $100 million, I don't have that. But I can at the very least offer a prayer. I could at the very least smile or give a kind word. And so I feel like as Muslims, what her story teaches us is that no matter who asks for what, we always give, because that's how she represented Islam. She always gave. So she lived her why. And another instance of a story that we famously share about Hazrat Fatima is the story of her pearl necklace. I also talked about this last year, but this year the context was again different because we were considering the why we've been created. So the story with that instant is she gave her pearl necklace to a beggar who asked her for something. And it was a wedding gift of hers. And so we always focus on the wedding dress or the wedding gift, but we don't focus on the spirit she interacted with people with. See, when we see a beggar and they ask us for money and we don't have money, we try not to make eye contact because we don't want to even give them that. And so what she teaches us in the example of the pearl necklace is she's interacting with every single person as if they're a gift from God, because she understands that no matter who comes to her door, it's just the face of Allah. And there's the famous hadith that says, why didn't you feed me when I came to your door? That Allah is speaking to a slave. Why didn't you give me water when I was thirsty? And the person's like, but you don't drink water, and you're not hungry, and you don't need to be clothed, Allah. And he's like, but my servant came as a representation of me. And you had the opportunity to serve me through serving them, but you chose not to. And so again, going back to the why of why we've been created, is to experience Allah in every moment, is to see Him as a reflection of every single one of us. Because what would it be like to interact with each other as a representative of God? What would it be like if every single person you came across carried a message from Allah directly to you, meant directly for you? How would you interact with that person differently? Because when I think of this, it reminds me that when I speak to my Father, I'm not just speaking to a man made of clay. I'm speaking to a man made of clay who carries the breath of God inside of him. And there's a holiness about that. And when I speak to my mother, I'm speaking to a reflection of Allah's compassion and mercy. That Allah chose her to be a bridge between heaven and earth for every single one of us. So when we reflect on the day, Mother's Day, it is a reflection of the holy bridges that Allah put on this earth, that the Prophet defines as that heaven lies beneath the feet of our mothers. And so going back to that why is to know ourselves and to worship Allah and to manifest mercy on earth. And we see that again through the examples of Hazrat Fatima. But then the question becomes, we know our why, but we still have this issue of there is pain in the world. So in the example of Hazrat Fatima, since we're talking about her life story, she had a pretty hard life. She was born to parents, and her mother died when she was at a young age. All of her brothers passed away. Her father died when she was at a relatively young age. She died several months after him. Her husband died from a sword wound with poison. Her son had very difficult lives. Her daughter was enslaved. Her life was hard. And so a lot of times then we ask that question, is she was a good person. She lived her why. She did everything Allah asked, and yet her life was so difficult. And so then we ask that question, the question that we all know familiarly, which is, why do bad things happen to good people? The reason I wanted to talk about this in relationship to her story is because one of my really good friends, her father is sick, and he has terminal cancer. And I picked up her sister, and her sister in the car said, I'm really mad at God because my father never smoked, he never drank, he was a good person, he is a good person. But his fate, it's so horrible. Why would God let that happen? And it made me think of Ashura and the court of Yazid and Zainab's speech and Imam Ali and what happened to Fatima. And I'm like, yeah, wow, like I can see that we all have this question. And she's like, he lived a good life. He should be a happy man. He should live until he's old. But that's not the reality he was given. And I want to tell you what I wanted to tell her if we were on the same faith track. What I wanted to tell her is, how do you define bad? What is bad to you? I wanted to ask her and tell her that the Quran says what you love may be bad for you, and what you hate may be good for you. I wanted to tell her that the Prophet said that Allah tests those with the greatest trials that he loves the most. I wanted to tell her that to me, that translates to Allah creates the most contrast for people he loves because he wants them to see reality as it is. I wanted to tell her that in every opportunity, in every phase of life, Allah is present. I wanted to tell her that sometimes Allah pushes us to the edge of a cliff just so he can show us that we can fly. I wanted to tell her that he would never push us to the depths of the ocean unless there were pearls for us to find. I wanted to remind her of her why, and her why wasn't to live an easy life, it was to get to know God. And to knowing someone isn't always easy, it isn't always beautiful. Anyone who's ever loved a person, anyone who's ever had a sincere friend knows that there are ups and downs, but those ups and downs create the beauty of the landscape, because there is no summit without a valley. So to experience that beautiful view, you have to go all the way down and go back up. Because if you think about it, in heaven, when we were given everything, we ate from an apple. I mean, did you ever think about that? Heaven, Jannah, they say is covered with infinite trees. And somehow we found the one tree that God was like, not that one. We found that one tree amongst infinite trees and ate from that one tree to get here. Like, we had no idea what we had until we left. And if you study optics and vision, you will know that when you, or for anybody who uses Instagram filters, if you turn up the contrast too much, your picture goes white. And if you turn up the contrast, turn it down too much, it goes black. And so in the extremes of only good and only bad, you see nothing. It's in the middle. Another way of saying that is your sight awakens in the shade, which is interesting considering on the day of judgment, the lovers of Allah are in the shade, because it's in the shade that sight awakens. And so it's in the contrast of hard and good, difficult and ease, that we have any experience to begin with. And so with that said, is Allah is testing those he loves to unveil different elements that are hidden. The Prophet says that amazing, peace be upon him, amazing is the affair of the believer, because when something difficult happens for him, it teaches him patience. And when something great happens for him, it teaches him gratitude. So the mystics say, it turns you from one face of Allah to another, from shakur to sabur. And so no matter where you look, all you see is God. And so in that difficulty, the sweetness of that difficulty is the fact that when you're hungry, really hungry, food tastes really good. But if you've ever overeaten, which I do, I have a problem with the 1/3, I don't know. It's more like 3/3, 4/3, 5/8. I'm not good at math. But anyways, you overeat, right? And you're like, oh, this is so good. And then they're like, here's this amazing ice cream. And you're like, I will throw up. As amazing as it is, you're filled. But when you're hungry, you can really taste the sweetness of what God's giving you. So God empties us to give to us. Another way of saying that is our poverty is our opportunity to experience God's richness. And so one of the elements of difficulty is to experience God as the healer. God makes you sick, you could say, or he gifts you with illness so that he could show up as the healer. He gives you deaths because he's the resurrector. He puts you in a state of poverty because he's the rich. And so he manifests his qualities through our humanity by doing that, by that contrast. And another element of why do bad things happen to good people is that through the difficult things that happen to us, Allah unveils to us our own abilities. Rumi says it this way. He says, wherever you find ruin, you will find a treasure. In fact, there's a story of a king who put a big boulder in the middle of the street, and he hid under it a purse filled with coins. And the boulder was blocking everybody's way. And so he hid behind a tree, and he watched as everybody that passed went around the boulder. And then one beggar came, and he noticed that nobody was moving the boulder, but the people's horses had trouble getting around it. So he strived and he pushed, and he spent the entire day trying to move the boulder. And with sore muscles and his palms were bleeding, he finally pushed it out of the road, only to discover a coin purse underneath with a note that said, whoever removes the boulder, this wealth belongs to them. And it made me think about how often Allah puts these difficulties in our life, and if we could just stay long enough to see what happens, we might have a different perspective of what that thing is. A pastor from Notre Dame Church in Paris about 150 years ago said something I think is interesting. He said, if God gave me his power for 24 hours, I would do a lot of things different. But if God gave me his wisdom too, I would leave things exactly as they are. Because he understood that we are stuck in time. Me and you, right now, we're stuck in this one time frame. But Allah is outside of time. He sees where every single one of you will end up tomorrow, a year from now, 10 years from now. He is preparing you for something. You think the caterpillar, when it's in the cocoon, one thing people don't really, I know that's a very used metaphor, but one thing they don't realize is caterpillars are liquefying. They're literally becoming liquid in a cocoon. That they almost have to fana, they have to dissolve to be given their wings. And so in that moment, in that frame of time, it looks horrible. But if you let the frames pass, you'll see a butterfly. And Allah sees all of that. He sees what he's doing with you every single moment, and he knows where he wants you to go. But we're stuck in time, so we can only see what's in front of us. And so this leads me to the third point in regards of why do bad things happen to good people, and how to address that question is have a good opinion of God. We hear this before. I like to say it differently. I like to say, be compassionate in your interpretation of what happens to you. Meaning, be open that the automatic response you have to something that happens to you may not be the truth. I'll give you a story I think is funny. This definitely didn't happen in America because I can't imagine this happening, but you can judge it. There was a psychologist, and there were these twin brothers, and they were wondering why one of them was so pessimistic and the other one was so negative. Positive. So optimistic and pessimistic. So one was very negative and one was very positive, and they wanted to know why that was, and so they're like, let's run a test. So they brought a room and they put these incredible, beautiful, shiny toys in one room, and they had the boy that was pessimistic in that room. And he kind of looked at the toys and he kind of pushed them around and he didn't really play with them. And then they had the other boy in another room filled with donkey dung, donkey poop, with a shovel. And they wanted to just observe what would happen. So these boys that grew up on a farm, these twin boys, one was just like, I'm not playing with these toys, this is stupid. And the other one had the shovel, and he's just digging in the donkey dung. Looks like he's looking for something. And they're like, what the heck is this? So they go to the boy with the toys, and they're like, why aren't you playing with your toys? This is like brand new toys. He's like, because they're not mine, and you're going to take them away from me. So I don't want to like them because you're going to take them. He had no gratitude. He didn't live in the present. And they went and asked the boy why he was shoveling in the donkey poop. And he said, man, there was so much poop here, I guarantee there's a donkey. And it makes us think, like sometimes I feel like I'm in donkey poo. I'm like, man, I'm in poop, but you know what? It's a good sign. You know, like the animal's somewhere nearby. And I think if we approach our trials in that way, like, man, like that should be a saying in our mosque. Like, how are things going? Like, you could say your alhamdulillah, be faithful. Alhamdulillah, donkey dung season. But the point being that he was optimistic because he had a good opinion of his reality. Like, instead of being like, I failed my test, which means I'm a failure and I'm leaving school and I'm the worst. An optimistic look. I'll give you an example for like the young people. Tom's shoes, I'm like looking over here because I see like youthful faces, mashallah. Tom's shoes, it's a famous brand started by Blake Mikowski, and you buy a pair of shoes, he gives a pair of shoes to people who don't have shoes. So how this was actually created, interestingly enough, is he did the Amazing Race, which is just like, it's basically you win $1 million if you win, you travel all over the world. And he came up second place. So he lost $1 million. And so because he lost his $1 million, he ended up staying in Argentina and taking the Argentinian shoe, which if made for polo, which looks exactly like Tom's shoes, and he designed it and made Tom's shoes, this brand. It stands for Tomorrow's Shoes. Cool, great, cool story. So he lost $1 million, okay? He just sold half of Tom's for $100 million. So in a sense, God had given him donkey poo by losing $1 million. Because there was a chain of events that was going to lead to something far greater, something that mattered much more. But he couldn't see that because he was stuck in time. And so the call I'm making for us is to have a good opinion of God, to open ourselves to interpreting what's happening to us in a different way. And just a quick story. I just like this. I'm weird. I collect stories. And there's a story about in Zen Buddhism of a man, and he's being chased by one tiger. And so he jumps off a ledge, and he holds on to a branch. And there's a tiger below him. There's a tiger above him. And he looks, and he sees a mice is eating the branch he's holding on to. This is pretty horrible. And in this moment, he sees a strawberry, and he picks it, and he eats it, and he's like, that was sweet. And it sounds hilarious, like what? Like, you're about to die. But in a way, what he's saying is that in every moment, with difficulty, there is something sweet. And it's which side of the coin do you want to focus on? Einstein says it another way. He says, you can either look at your life and existence as a miracle or not as a miracle. However way you see it, in both instances you're right. Meaning the reality you choose to focus on is the reality you will experience. And so my call is to say, not why does bad things happen to good people, but what is that difficult thing trying to show the good person? How is Allah showing himself through this difficult situation? Because nothing is happening ever to you. It's always happening for you to see something about yourself, Allah, or to help you serve humanity in a greater way. And we see that through the example of this woman that we're celebrating tonight, is that she saw. I said it last year, I'll say it this year. If I was Fatima Zahra, I'd stop answering the door. Girl gets knocks and all her stuff's gone. like Imam Hussein, Imam Hassan, the goat they were sleeping on, she's like, all right, let's give this up. Like, they're just seriously in an empty room. She's looking for stuff to give people. And actually, I hate to shout out Khanum Qazvini's mom, but I have to. When we were in Iraq, I remember, like, this is what I'm talking about, holy people. I'm like sitting there, I'm like, wow, everyone knows everything about how to like be at shrines, and I'm just this newbie trying to listen, and how do you do it? I'm not sure, and I'm watching from afar, and I was just sort of daydreaming, listening, and we were at the beautiful house of one of the Qazwini family members, and we're eating this beautiful food, and Khanum Qazvini's mom is talking, and I see this like beautiful ring on her hand. I'm like, wow, that ring is so, woo, that's beautiful. Like, but to myself, because like I'm Persian, we have tarof, and like if you say you like something, people like take off their clothes and stuff, and I'm like, okay, I don't want war here, so I'm like, okay, don't say anything, but I'm like staring at it, I'm like trying to memorize it. I'm like, can I Pinterest this? Like, does it exist? I'm just trying to memorize this ring. And as I'm thinking about it, and I'm just thinking to God, I'm like, wow, that's really cool. Like, I wonder where she got that from. My mom, like out of nowhere, goes, wow, your ring is so beautiful. And I'm like, whoa. I was like, yeah, I'm trying to be like real low-key. I'm like, what ring? Cool ring, what? You know? And I'm like, oh, cool. And I like put it on my fat finger, and I'm like trying to take it off, you know, like it's not coming off. And I'm like, okay, I'm like, oh, really beautiful, really shouldn't have tried it on, that was rude. And she's like, no, you can keep it. And I was like, no, it's gold, like, that's okay. And she's like, no, you can't. I'm like, no, like, really? I felt like I was getting married, because you know you say like no a million times in Persian culture. And I was like, do I get to say yes on the third one, or how does this work? So I'm like, no. And she's like, I want you to have it. Like, it's done. And I remember being like really torn, because I'm like, I don't know, my dad always tells us don't take anything from anybody. But when I felt into it, like it was that Fatima Zahra spirit. It was like, I'm giving this to you from my whole heart, because I want you to remember this moment and the selflessness that goes into that act. Like, it was such a beautiful ring. She's had it for years, and she took it off and gave it to me to make sure that my experience in this town that was my first time would be significant. So I guess I wanted to share that story because as just a reminder of who we have leading this mosque, and you know, Hadi is sitting here as well, assalamu alaikum, and this family is they walk the talk, and I think having role models like that, especially as women, is really incredible. And in the same breath, like, I feel like I have to shout out my mom, because, and all the moms here, because I think as children sometimes we don't understand how much you've sacrificed for us. And my grandfather said this really well. He said that when you wake up children in the middle of the night, they say 5 more minutes. 5 more minutes. But when you wake up your mom, I'm like, girl, there's no fire in here. Like, when I wake up my mom, like, as a kid, I'd be like, yo. She'd be like, what? Like, she was ready, like, and I was like, whoa, like, oh my God. She's like, oh, wait, do you ever sleep? Like, she jumps up, you know? And my grandfather said nothing. He's like, because he's from Rashton, he's like, if you go after chickens, interesting metaphor, but he's like, if you run after baby chickens, they run away. But if you run after a mother chicken, it runs at you. You know, and like, that's how I feel. I feel like the moms, like, that's how they are. And I think that in our lives, maybe we've, in different ways, we have made mistakes, and I've always found forgiveness in her. And today I was telling my brother these stories because he couldn't make it, and I was telling him, he was like, oh, what are you going to talk about? And I was telling him these stories of Fatima, and he's like, not to be like bragging about mom, but she sounds so much like mom. Like, I could see mom doing all these things. And I was like, that's true, and what a gift, you know? So I just wanted to take that moment and to shout out the moms, just because we were talking about that. And I don't want to leave you guys hanging, so I wanted to just say something about this topic before we end, because I know they're bringing in the food, is that if you look throughout history in the Quran, every single person went through hard times. So if you're going through hard times, it's not because Allah hates you or is punishing you, because we can never know that, right? And Allah loves every single one of you. So we know from the prophets, every single one. I mean, Noah was like 950 years. He's like, everybody come to God. And they're like, no. And he's like, okay, I'm going to build a boat in the desert. Like, that's hard. Like, we have struggles, right? Mine's like praying outside. Oh, God. Okay, I'll tell you guys this story. So, I don't know. I have this thing where I like to pray outside. Like, I'm not like the I'm going to pray in my car person. I'm just like, let's do this. Like, Bismillah. Like, I'm outside on the grass, like, if I'm between stuff. So, anyways, one time I was getting, like, you know those Asian massage places, like foot massage places? So I had an appointment at one, and she's like, 10 minutes. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, I have to pray. This is great. So I went between, my dad's going to kill me, between the parking lot, like, grass. You know how sometimes there's, like, grass between parking lots? I was like, this is such a perfect area for my, like, John Namaz. So I'm like, okay, Bismillah, I have 10 minutes. Allahu Akbar. First rakat, the lady screams, opens the door and says, your massage ready. And I'm like, just look straight, don't laugh. You can't stop. You just have 4 more rakats left. So I'm like, Bismillah, okay, go down. And she comes, she's like, hey! Your massage ready. Okay, there's a lot more left. You know when things slow down, you're like, oh, time is so slow. And then she comes, like, crosses the parking lot and comes right next to me again. Hey! Your massage ready! And I'm like, uh-huh. I'm like wondering if there's a word. Like my mom, when you used to call her, she'd be like, Bismillah! And we'd know, like, she was praying. But I was like, she's going to be freaked out if I'm like, Allahu Akbar! Like, so I was like, okay. And she's like, why you no reply? And I'm like, can't answer that. And I'm staying there and I'm like, I swear to God, I'm like, okay, Allah, like, you are the saver. You parted seas for Moses. Like, help a girl out. Like, and she's just like, I don't get it. She's talking to me. And this person I swear to God, it was like, talk about prophets don't exist. This man could have been Khidr. Because he was, I hear someone yell, she's praying from like across the thing. And I'm like, yeah, good guy, good my man. And she's like, why is she no reply? He's like, she can't talk to you. Like, and so now whenever people ask me like, oh, like, I don't like praying, I'm like, I dealt with the worst. Like, it's all good now. Like, so anyways, once I went in there, she's like, you're Muslim? And I'm like, yeah. But anyways, so now me and her are closer. But I share that with you because this is the worst correlation ever. Because that's way easier than building a boat in the desert. But we see with the prophets, all of them had these little things. Like think about Joseph. They're like, he's the most beautiful man. Like, women cut their fingers looking at him. But he started in a well. And then he was like, cool, I'm out of a well. And then he was in a house. Then he got thrown in prison. And he's like, oh, this is the worst. And then again in prison, he stayed longer. So he went from the well to the prison to the palace. Right? He ended in the palace. But during that process, you're probably like, wow, this sucks. But God had a plan for him. I was thinking, Moses punched a man and killed him, went into exile and became a prophet. Like, talk about having no influence. And God makes you a prophet and gives you these abilities, these miracles, this incredible thing. So I feel like the final reminder is that we are all given these difficulties as opportunities of growth, as opportunities to manifest something inside of us. God is using our trials as the platform for his next miracle. And I know it's silly to consider a guy yelling from a parking lot across as like an answer from God, but I believe it. I believe it because I choose to look at my reality as a conversation of me with God. And so I call you to not define the things that happen to you as bad, but just as an opportunity to know a different face of God, maybe a face you haven't yet experienced. And I was going to say a poem, but I feel like it's complete, so I just want to do a prayer, if you don't mind, with you. And first of all, pray that we can take the example of Hazrat Fatima in our life and to live our why, is to live a life focused on knowing and loving and worshiping God and knowing ourselves. And to remember that our purpose of our life is not just the pursuit of happiness. It's the pursuit of transformation and becoming what Allah created us to be. And I just want to take a moment and pray for all the people who are suffering in Yemen, in Palestine, in Nigeria, and different places of Africa, the Congo, of the people suffering with coronavirus all over the world, especially in China, for the people of Turkmenistan, for the people in India and Pakistan and different places of the world where there's turmoil. I pray for all the people who are sick, especially Hossein Surush, and anybody else that comes to your hearts, that Allah blesses them with abundant healing and that He makes their healing a testimony of faith. I pray for every single one of you, especially those of you who are suffering, silent suffering, who are dealing with depression or battles that they feel like no one can understand. I pray that Allah shows Himself to you and that you feel His love surround and embrace you. I pray for all the people who are dealing with grief and who have lost something they can't seem to get back, that Allah would fill in the gaps for them. I pray for our mothers and our fathers, for our siblings and family members and our friends. And I pray that Allah helps us to be representatives of His love for all people without discrimination. Ameen.
Thank you, Sister Arzu. What such wonderful words of encouragement. I think we all know who to call when we're having a difficult patch going on in our lives. Thank you, Sister Arzu, again. We will now have the raffle in a very short while. So for those of you who still want to buy raffle tickets, they're still available outside. Please, this is your last opportunity to go ahead and purchase any tickets. Before I invite Sister Nahid Yatsai to the podium to help out with the raffles, I would like to tell you a little story. It's actually a real story, and I think it'll make you very, very happy. And we'll complete the program today very soon after that. So, this is a story where a man from Medina, I believe, comes to Imam Muhammad al-Baqir. And he says to the Imam, "O Imam, O grandson of the Holy Prophet, tell me about the greatness of your grandmother Fatima. Tell me something about her merit and her virtue. Tell me something that if I share with the Shias of the world, they will be delighted and very, very happy." The story ties in very well with some of the words that Arzu has just imparted with us. Listen to this hadith. Imam Muhammad al-Baqir says, on the day of Qiyamah, when Fatima al-Zahra is escorted to paradise, she will stand at the gate of paradise. Taltafitu is the Arabic word. She will stop. She will stop and look behind her. And Allah will say to her, Ya binti Habibi, O the daughter of my beloved, why did you stop? Why did you stop when I've admitted you into my paradise? Fatima will respond by saying, O Allah, I wanted people to know my rights and position on this day. Sayyidah Fatima only lived 18 years, a very short period in this life. On Yawm al-Qiyamah, every single person will know who she was. Allah will say to her, "Okay, Ya Fatima, go back amongst the people and find anyone who loves you or loves your progeny and take them with you into Jannah." Imam Muhammad Baqir says, "I swear by God, she will go back amongst these trillions of people and she will handpick her lovers and the lovers of the Ahlul Bayt in the same way that a bird picks out the good seeds from the bad seeds." With this, my dear brothers and sisters, I want to thank you. I want to thank Sayyid Mustafa Kazwini and his family. I want to thank all the volunteers, all the speakers, all the donors of whom without this event would have not occurred. And most of all, thank you to all our attendees. We had a significant amount raised this year from donors, and we are so appreciative of every penny and every cent that you've given us. A portion of this went to tonight's event. Another portion went towards the masjid. And the third portion is actually going to be given in form of hot meals to the needy tomorrow in LA downtown, in the name of Lady Fatima Zahra. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for every single cent again that you have donated towards this event. May Allah and the Ahlul Bayt be pleased with us, and let us raise our hands in dua to Allah to instill the love of Ahlul Bayt in our hearts forever. Can I call upon Sister Nahid Yassai now to call out the winners of our raffles and the lucky mums tonight who have also had an opportunity to win some prizes.
Okay, the first winner is Roya Dima Morandi for $55 to Woodfire. She's going to treat her parents. That shouldn't make that winner. Okay, Huda Berry. $50 to Mission Ranch Market. You're welcome. She's got the groceries. Jihad Aboud. Guys are that? Okay. Is he honest guy? I don't know. Next. Mission Ranch Market. Confirmed. Maluk Ilahi. Maluk Ilahi. She celebrated, but she didn't want to walk. I'm gonna eat your kebabs if you don't come get it. Is she here? She's coming? Is her mom? Okay, sorry. Sarah Jarahian. Yay. There you go. $50 at most.
Dima Morandi again. This is rigged. Kebab and groceries. Ali Charlara. $50 to Rich Mission Ranch. Ali Muhammadi. It's for your mom. Okay. $50 Mission Range. Oh, Sayyid Muhammad Azmini. No. Oh, $50 Mission Ranch. Zainab Saleh. Zainab looks like a man, but... What was it? $50 Mission Ranch. Sedime Omidvar. She's outside, just so cute. $50 Mission Ranch. Oh, sorry. Ahmed Abu. That's your brother? Yeah. Good job, you guys are lucky. Mission Ranch. Lucky people. Ooh, man, this family. Jihad Abu. This time he came up, he's like, yo, I'm gonna do jihad and walk up here. If you guys want a free dinner, just hit up the Abus. Hey, look at this. I'm Samir Amiri. $50 Mission Range. Matthew Abu. They're eating for free this month. Asanif Fazeli. Okay.
I'll give it to her. Because she left it. Anything remained of it, I'll give it to her.
Faten Ibrahim. $50 Mission Range. Nahi Jalali. Nahi's not here? She's coming. Oh, okay, sorry. $50 Mission Ranch. You're welcome. Okay, we have 5 gifts for the mothers, so this is the mother's raffle. Asma Oder. Yeah, let's clap for the moms. Yes, sir. Amal Esaili. That's the mom. Let's say mashallah for the Abu family. Say Hadi said if buying lottery was halal, that would have told you who to buy. Nargis Sharifi. Nargis Sharifi. She's coming. And also Manzar Talari. And the last one, Amina Jarawakian. One more time for everybody who helped sell raffles and put this together. And there's a hot dinner right behind us from the Wood Fire Grill. So you can just give it up for everybody who was part of this day.
Thank you everyone for your patience. A hot dinner from Wood Fire Kebab will be served at the back of the room. Jazakallah khair.
Such love. That was so